Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
Are we rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go.
Hey, Reagan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
All right, come on, let's go. It's toots, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the
Here we
lines
are.
right this time.
All right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Well, hello, wall crawlers, and welcome to the 36th episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and tonight it's all about House of the Dragon, baby.
That's right, everybody. And joining us on the air is director Clare Kilner, who has been kind enough to make time to stop in between premieres for the new season of House of the Dragon.
And Claire directed some of the most significant episodes of Season 1 as well, those being 4, 5, and 9, all of which carried a daunting weight of directing tasks.
And for once, Poxy's right. If you've already watched Season 1 of House of the Dragon, then you're well aware of some of the potential challenges and dynamics that likely factor into creating scenes with hundreds of people, large computer-generated dragons, and scenes shot in rooms large enough to house the NBA Finals.
Yeah, then there is the lascivious desire of the characters, who indulge in all sorts of bizarre, devious sexual activity, which I feel is challenging for any actors and their directors. Now, Claire's responsible for the infamous brothel scene in Season 1 between characters young Rhaenyra and her Uncle Daemon, receiving a ton of praise and positive review for how the scene was put together and depicted, or filmed, so to speak.
Well, side note, if you haven't seen House of the Dragon, we probably need to stop and put some things into place for you.
Yeah, a little synopsis for contact, huh, Ray?
We really should probably start the conversation off that way, but House of the Dragon comes from the world of Game of Thrones, itself being a story by George R.R. Martin, but this time the focus is on the Targaryen family, its heir to the throne, and the battle to decide who that heir will be.
It's like a medieval succession with sword fighting instead of executive deals.
Sort of, but House of the Dragon stands on its own as a visual effort far beyond the scope of your typical series, incorporating larger-than-life dragons into the mix. The VFX team isn't messing around when it comes to how they've been able to get that onto screen. More on that later.
Yeah, and with all of that, it's time for Season 2 now, where we will watch it all play out. And Claire's returned to directing for the show once again, beginning with Episode 2 this season.
She's also had a busy year directing the hit series Fallout, which has lit up the world with its wild on-screen adaptation of the notorious video game of the same name.
Yo, I never played a lot of Fallout, but I spent an unhealthy amount of time playing Fallout Shelter.
That's like the little clicker version of the game, right?
Well, I suppose. All I know is my vault was ballin'. Well, my second vault. The first one caught fire, and then the rad roaches showed up, and shit fell apart pretty quickly after that for me.
You're killing me.
Well, I learned, all right? I learned. Second time around, you know?
Anyway, Claire's responsible for directing episodes 5 and 7 of Fallout, the latter being the penultimate episode for the first season.
Yeah, you know, I realized that was the case for her on House of the Dragon, too. That's a lot of pressure having to work on the show that sets up the ending.
Well, they're usually the best episodes of the entire series.
True. You know, I don't mean to digress, but I read they also shot a lot of Fallout in Namibia, out on the Skeleton Coast.
Sounds fitting.
Yeah, I wonder if Claire worked out there.
Well, we'll have to ask.
I have to.
You know, Claire's also well known for her work on the early aughts rom-coms, The Wedding Date, How to Deal, and American Virgin, and she even wrote and directed her own film, Janice Beard, back in 1999, when things started moving along in her film career.
More on that later. Simon is also in the house with another segment of the cinematic dumpster fire, so stay tuned for that during our break later.
And speaking of quick breaks, it's time to take one of those, so stay tuned because when we return, director Clare Kilner will join us to talk all things House of the Dragon, right here on The Ghost of Hollywood. Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Miss Ragan with Poxy Leonard, and in the studio tonight we have director Clare Kilner with us to discuss her work on hit shows such as Fallout and the critically acclaimed series House of the Dragon. Claire, thanks for joining us. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. Actually, I just flew in from London yesterday, so I'm a bit jet lagged, but you got me in the morning, which is good.
Oh, are you? So you're in the States right now? Are you in LA?
Yes, I'm in Los Angeles. Yeah, I flew to New York and London for the premieres of House of the Dragon.
Okay, so you've been quite
very
busy.
busy, yeah.
How's the weather? You glad to be out in the sun and taking it easy down there?
Gorgeous, yeah. Yeah, actually it was pretty good in England for half of the time, and it was lovely in New York, so not bad.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show with us. Let's go ahead and get started. In a recent interview discussing House of the Dragon, you mentioned your interest in any sort of story or screenplay focused or centered around a dysfunctional family. Now, given that House of the Dragon fits this theme well, how do you feel your particular interest in this sort of story has allowed you to deliver such well-received episodes?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess the reason why I came into film directing in the first place is to sort of, to really connect with people because I felt a little bit alone in the world. And, I've got a complicated family story from when I was young. So I think I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was dealing with that and didn't really know how to. So having a creative outlet started helping me sort of explore that. And I think, family is everything and it sort of, messes us up and also gives us these incredible connections and love stories and everything, so it's like the root of who we are in so many ways. And it's so, it's sort of just so many interesting relationships and battles that really tap into something very within us, stem from family. So, House of the Dragon has such rich, deep relationships that are larger than life, and the sort of loves and the passions and the anger and the sort of desire for revenge, fueled often by love, is those kind of relationships are quite extreme and the feelings are quite extreme, so it's a really great place to explore it all.
There's so much character development that goes into that, and and you have to deal with the chronological aspects of dealing with, say, younger versions of these characters because there's so much passage of time. With the passage of time, and then how do you feel, or at least I know that there's kind of an overall crew that works on these various episodes, but what is the motivation that approaches and deals with the extended chronology involved with the show?
I mean, that just sort of happens naturally because I love working with actors and have a great collaboration, and especially after doing doing 3 episodes on one season, coming back to a show like this is very exciting because you have developed trust with the actors, and I know how hard those actors work in terms of building their character arc. So I think, between us all, we feed into that. That first season, it was really interesting, working, with Millie and then Emma and Emily and then Olivia. It's just like I've never done anything like that before, working with 2 different characters. But I think they very much made it their own, and it just seemed to work. We were all nervous about that, split in the middle of the season and how it would be received, by the audience. Once you come to love characters and then suddenly the actors aren't there anymore. But I think, people seem to ultimately embrace it, although they do miss Millie and Emily a bit. I know that.
Was between the actors with, let's say, with the older following the younger, is there some study into the younger character to be able to take on the tonality and the sort of charisma or the overall function of that character? And did the actors communicate on that level at all, or was this really left up to your direction?
I mean, I think the actors made the choice just to, know the previous scripts, but to, an actor really brings themselves to the role and their life experience and their mannerisms and who they are. I mean, I know the one thing that carried on was young Alicent to old Alicent was the sort of fingernail biting. And, I think that was just like, it's such a detail, but it really helped to have that working all the way through the season. And it was, I love, finding behaviors and things, but that was something that worked in, with the actors and between the showrunners, Miguel and Ryan at the time. But I think, I'm always looking for like, what created this, what brought someone to this sort of point in their life, what happened to them in the past. So I guess, I don't know, it's a difficult question. I think the actors brought themselves, but the writers and the directors had the overview.
Previously you mentioned a lot of like the challenges of working with CGI, and like some examples, particularly obviously like the dragon pit with Rhaenys and then Aegon becoming crowned, where you have a multitude of extras that you have to deal with and replicate shots of. So you're squeezing in shots. You're working with, a lot of, is there new generative technology? I mean, we always kind of use CGI as a generic term. How is the working with the digital elements on House of the Dragon really play into the overall added creations that you've had to put into the show?
Yeah. I mean, it was very, I was kind of a bit overwhelmed at the beginning. I'm not going to lie. It's, I'd never done such a huge sequence, but then I always just bring it down to sort of the human level and do research of sort of, for example, a space where, people, there's been sort of some sort of event and either a football stadium or a concert venue or something where something's gone wrong and people are sort of trying to escape and trampling on each other and not allowed out of the right doors and things like that. So I always really start from the very human level, and that sort of grounds me. But there's incredible support with everyone in VFX, and obviously my first AD, Nick Hextall Smith, and my cinematographer, Alejandro Martinez. We really start working, like having ideas, drawing on those ideas, then working with the storyboard artist and starting to, we did hundreds of storyboards of every single frame of that sequence. And then we discuss it, with the VFX department, and they have their input. And then we have another meeting with Jim Clay, the production designer, and we need to work out the studio space because, for example, that arena, the Dragon Pit, was meant to be the size of at least one football pitch, and our studios aren't that big. So you really have to start looking at perspectives. And so, for example, when Rhaenys comes into the Dragon Pit, everything that was in front of her when we were, for example, shooting over her shoulder was into a blue screen. So we'd have to show Eve everything that we'd shot with all the royals on the days for her to react to, because we then had to take everything that we shot on the days and make it smaller so the perspective from her point of view would work. So we have to shoot, and then we have to shoot everything over the shoulders of the royals on the days into a blue screen, and I have to show them all the work that Eve has done. And then, for example, we don't have that many extras to fill the whole space, so we have to tile it. And so we do lots of different passes, for example, of everyone running towards the door. And I have to say the extras that we had were amazing, and they just went for it every single time. When they were trying to like run out of the Dragon Pit and the doors were closing.
That is a lot of people, though. It's 400 people. How do you? I'm asking this just out of pure curiosity. How do you manage that when you have a scene where that many people are going manic?
I mean, we have wonderful crew, really. We've got a brilliant Rowley Earlham who does stunts. We've got brilliant ADs. We've got, people who deal with the crowd. We also trained up also for when Aegon goes through the sort of archway with the swords. We trained up some sort of extras were trained up by sort of a military commander guy who just rehearsed them over and over again, because we didn't have enough people for that arch of swords either. So we had to do that 3 times and then, take those elements and put them in the final cut. And then everything that was all the individual stunts were done on a separate day with Rowley, people, falling into the Dragon Pit, skirmishes, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a huge scene. It's like the producers really build the schedule around this, and it's really an incredible collaboration between all the departments, and I feel lucky to be working on a show that has so many incredible professionals who are just great at their job, because it makes me look good.
Yeah, well-
But it's also, I can then bring the creative side, and I love talking to the extras about, their motivation, but also again, have really great ADs who are doing that. So, and then when you put the dragon into the mix and we've just got a stick with a ball on top, and we've got wind machines, blowing Alison's hair, and, it's an awful lot going on, but you just break it down beat by beat, and then and also you then do a sort of little animation of the whole thing, and you look at it and you discuss it with the showrunners, and there's a lot of input from everybody.
Well, that's what you had said in previous interviews that, like, I know you were talking earlier, you mentioned doing your research for it, and you said you, like, actually studied some military videos and stuff to kind of get an idea of the overall, like, kind of vision for this on a large platform, right?
Yeah. Initially, I think Egon was meant to come in on a horse, and there was a problem. We couldn't bring a horse into the space with all those people, or I can't remember what the reason was. And then I was like, how are we going to sort of create something really that feels very real and like a big event that they've also cobbled together in a short space of time? And so I thought of this archway of swords because I love, sound design as well. And I just knew the sound of those swords when they're like crossing each other and he's having to walk through would just give it that extra something. But then when Tom walked through, other things happened because he had to walk through for such a, just keeping the walk was a long walk. And, he starts sort of like, oh God, mummy, I don't want to do this, and he's walking through these swords. And then he's sort of like getting his sort of chest is getting puffed up and he's like building himself up and he's like, oh, I quite like this, all the attention is good. And then what was amazing was when he turned the corner and then saw Olivia there. I was talking to Tom and he was just like, he was thinking, mommy. It's like, I love that. I didn't really know that was going to happen, but there's something really shifted there as he saw her through the archway of the sword. So you have these ideas, and then everyone brings something new that you don't expect. But I always prepare for like to shoot a scene like 5 different ways, and usually the actors come in and they've got a 6th way that I hadn't even thought of. I'm like, oh God, how am I going to do this? But you collaborate. And I think as a director, it's also important to sometimes say, oh, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, because there's so many people who have such great ideas who will, feed those in. And I think if you can leave your ego at the door and be open to the best idea or the most exciting idea, then you just, the show takes on a life of its own.
Well, you've mentioned the production designer, Jim Clay, in previous interviews. You also mentioned him a bit earlier, but with the world of House of the Dragon having a medieval fantasy atmosphere, how valuable is it to have someone as talented as Jim working on set to help capture the visual aspects that you were looking for in your episodes?
I mean, Jim is incredible. I can't find enough adjectives to describe him, what he does. And he's just like such a calm, grounded person. And he does these most beautiful watercolors and sketches of, kind of places before he's designed them or as they're coming alive in his head. And, he has an incredible team working with him. I mean, it was interesting, the scene with young Rhaenyra and Daemon when they go to the sort of orgy.
You talking about the scenes in the brothel?
Yes,
that was the one you were commended. Well, I wanted to bring that up because you and I don't mean to digress. I'll let you go, but you were commended, in a lot of the reviews for the way that you were able to depict that scene, and then the subsequent scene with Sir Kristen, because everyone was saying it finally looked like a woman was able to enjoy sex in the show rather than be tormented by it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of those scenes, because I knew, Game of Thrones and the way, it's an incredible show, but I didn't particularly like the way women were filmed. And it was also like a while back and things have changed a bit, but I really had to think very deeply about it for myself, because I grew up on films with sex scenes that from the male point of view with a male gaze. So I really had to think deeply about what was the female gaze, because I wasn't 100% sure. But then again, I went back to a story, something that happened to me when I was in my early 20s, and I used to be a stage manager, and I was a DSM, deputy stage manager, on an opera. And the stage manager said, we were in Berlin, and he said, "Oh, come to this club, this incredible club." We went to this club, and he said, "Oh my God, you've got to see these rooms downstairs." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm a bit scared." And he said, "No, come with me, pretend we're together, and we'll you've just got to see it." So he took me down through these winding corridors into this like incredibly dark room. And as we went into the room, and as my eyes got accustomed, I saw just everything happening before my eyes, people walking towards each other in slow motion. And it was just like the image of what I saw like stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I thought, this is a little bit like young Rhaenyra sort of being introduced to this world. So I then pitched the idea to Miguel and Ryan, and it's like, can I just shoot, can we work this scene from this angle? And he said, okay, write down the beats that you want to do. So I did that. I wrote sort of like a beat sheet of how I imagined the scene, and they said, look, go for it. So then, of course, for Millie, it was like she didn't want to go into the room until we started shooting. So, Matt brought her into the room, and then she was sort of like, had her head rested on his shoulder and peeking out at what was going on. And, it was sort of scary and exciting and different, and it awakened something in her. But then also in terms of working, what I was going to say about Jim Clay, for example, we didn't have all these little corridors. So we started talking, throwing ideas around, and Jim had been to the Tate Gallery or something and seen this really interesting installation where it used all this sort of Hessian sacking. And he said we could use this Hessian sacking for the walls. And then you can see, shadows of people doing things behind these curtains if we light them right. And Alejandro Martinez said, oh yeah, we can sort of like create some sort of broken sort of holes in some of the sacking, and I can have someone walking through with candles and lanterns, so there's movement and shadows that all adds to the mystery. So really this is how all the heads of department start working and together, and ideas, we feed on each other's ideas. So Jim is also very open and just has a ton of ideas.
How long did you, given the extensive components of how meticulous the lighting was, how long did it take to shoot this scene?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of prep. I can't remember. I think we did it over 2 days.
Oh, that's pretty quick. I mean, that's pretty quick for all of that.
Yeah, but we had rehearsals. We also had an incredible choreographer and the choreographer's assistant who came in. And the fun thing was all the people in the brothel who sort of were like, half naked. They were so excited to be like House of the Dragon, half naked. They just couldn't wait to get their clothes off. So that bit was quite easy. I got a bit embarrassed at times. I'm like, I was like, oh God, how am I going to direct this? But, eventually you all just have a giggle.
Well, you're not incredibly shot at sex scenes. I mean, you shot some of the earlier rom-coms. I know we're not going to discuss them too much today, but like
the wedding date.
Yeah, in the wedding date with there's some scenes with Dermot and with Deborah Messing.
And Dermot Mulroney, yes.
They seem they're more romance than novelesque than I think they are sexual, at least but what's the difference in shooting a scene like that and then transitioning and
Yeah, I mean, it's so different. And the time, the wedding date was a while back as well. And, I remember at the wedding date, talking with Deborah, we really wanted to, have the character's sort of flaws and sort of her embarrassment and sort of enjoy it, but be a little bit scared. And, Deborah Messing is such a brilliant comedic actress. You always want to lean into that. But it's always, whatever scene I get, whether it be in TV or in film, it's like finding those human moments, the flaws, the fears, the passions, but the things going a little bit wrong. I think those, finding the humor in a scene like that always adds a whole other level and takes it away from the sort of voyeuristic just sort of show. So we're really looking. I'm always interested in looking at the inner lives of people. Like, how do you show what's going on inside people's heads and hearts and souls outwardly? How do you depict that? Because that's what really the game is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, so there's been significance, and you've answered this question in previous interviews to a degree, but there's some significance in the 9th episode for working on the House of the Dragon and the Game of Thrones with each season, and but you've also to tie more intricacy into that, you've been challenged, and I want to draw Fallout in a little bit because you've worked on Fallout. Now you've worked on the penultimate episodes for both of these programs, so there's a challenge in that. I feel that you're kind of setting up the ending, so to speak, and there's either a transition in pacing or in the suspense that has to be added to that. Having dealt with this now with 2 very successful series like in the last year or so, how have you been able to approach these challenges, and with each episode, how have you addressed them?
I mean, I think it's really getting the momentum. So you really want to sort of find momentum in the story, in the transitions. Sometimes, for example, in episode 9 of House of the Dragon, you start, when Rhaenys is going through the streets trying to, head towards the dragon pit, you do a bit of handheld, shooting long lens through foreground. It sort of gives us sort of momentum and often a mystery to it. Sometimes I like to do POV shots, on a Steadicam or on handheld. So you really feel that you're in the character's shoes. So we start to sort of like ramp things up and set up expectation.
Well, I know that you have, some directors can be removed from the camera a bit, but I know you like to get behind the camera a little bit too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing, to be honest, because I'm really not a technical person. Like, I'm technical in terms of all my planning, and I really work closely with the cinematographer and the choice of lenses and all of that. But early on in my career, as a young female director, I was worried that I didn't know enough about all the technical aspects. And I didn't know enough because I don't have that desire to know all the makes of the camera and which camera. And maybe I should, but I just, when people start talking numbers to me, I sort of glaze over and it just doesn't excite me. What really excites me is how to translate emotions and feelings visually onto the screen. So yeah, I don't know. As I've got older, I'm a little bit less down on myself for that. And I just really, for example, with Alejandro, I've worked with, we worked on The Alienist, and then we met on Mosquito Coast. And then I asked him to come with me, to House of the Dragon, because he's a DP who's very open to the creative process that I have with the actors as well, and really collaborative. So for example, when we get the scripts, I'll say, okay, Alejandro, come on, let's go on set, and we'll, just play the parts, and we'll just be me and Alejandro and, our first AD, Nick Hextall-Smith. And actually Nick ended up wanting to join in with the reading. So we're all acting these parts out and moving around the room and getting a sense of the space, especially because in House of the Dragon, the space is so huge, the throne room, for example. It's very difficult to block sometimes in spaces like that, because if you're in someone's living room, you go, oh, he walks to the window or he sits on the sofa, but we don't have any of that there. So it's like, how do you use the space to express power or again, what's going on inside people, to express it through the blocking and physically within the space. So we act out the scene, and then we think, okay, if we had to shoot this in one shot, what would it be? So looking at it and talking about it in that way, about how to shoot it in one shot, helps us get to the nub of the theme of the scene. And then once we've got that, I mean, we have a lot of ideas and we throw a lot of ideas out, but once we find something that hits a chord, you know it's right. When you land on something, you know it's right, then everything comes from that. And then you start expanding on all the shots and how you're going to shoot it.
But there is a real, it sounds like between you and Alejandro, there is a real language of that can be kind of unspoken that translates between your work as a director and their work as a cinematographer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, it's great when you have that, when you're in sync like that.
Well, as you continue your work into season 2, how has your experience directing 3 episodes in season 1 and the fans' response influenced your approach to the newer episodes?
Well, I mean, I didn't expect to. What was wonderful about the fans' response is that I had a lot of people get in touch with me on Instagram. And, you know, I'm not very good on Instagram. I'm quite private. I don't really put myself out there that much. But what I did love was hearing everyone's opinions and thoughts from all over the world. I got people from Bolivia, from Brazil, from India.
Now you blew up overnight, didn't you? Like, that's what you were saying. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I think I posted one specific. I posted a couple of images from the rehearsal room with Fabian and Millie, and I literally, my phone started like just beeping every second for like about 2 days. I got 10,000 followers, and I was like, what do I do with this? I'm just not really good at all that. But I did love the connection and hearing what people's thoughts were. And, you know, it really brings it home how important storytelling is and how it really does, you know, seep into people's lives in a really big way and how much people care about these characters. So even though I felt a big responsibility doing House of the Dragon, following on Game of Thrones, when I come to season 2, you know, it's really important that I don't take sides, because I always am working on the side of the character that I'm directing at that moment. And even if I'm working with a room with the greens and the blacks, every single person I'm talking to, I come at it from their point of view and I sympathize with, you know, what they're going through and what they want in that scene.
You're like a directing referee.
Yes. Yeah, I literally flip from character to character, and I literally sometimes stand behind that character, you know, when we're rehearsing, to see how it looks, to see the room from their point of view. So say for example, we're doing something in the small council, you know, I'll stand behind Reese and look at all the faces, look at him and think, how does it feel to be Otto, you know, and then stand behind Tom and, you know, how does it feel to be Tom? Oh yeah, these people look like they're conniving against me. Those other people are like a sycophants and they're annoying, or I love them, or whatever, you know, it might be. But you know, you really have to see it from each person's point of view. And I get a lot of people saying, you the greens or the blacks, and I'm, you know, I will never ever, you know, take one side. But yeah, I really value all the feedback I get, you know, and I'm not the writer, and, you know, we don't always get everything right for some people, but, you know, I still like hearing from them.
Well, I think that, like, say as just my experience as a viewer, it's got what I like about it is sometimes you find yourself rooting for maybe ethically the wrong side at given points. So there's this. It's almost just like pernicious inwardness. Maybe I'm just got problems. I don't know, but the core of it is that.
No, I do too. You know, and like.
Well, you're kind of rooting for him, and you're like, wait, why am I rooting for him? But you're like, but there's some. I think it really correlates around the idea of like the justice and then the rules of the game at play in the show. But how you all kind of bend and fold with our emotions as the viewer is brilliant. You're doing a great job there.
Oh, thank you.
But is there a lot of focus to that, like to the I mean, like is there a particular, if we drive it this way emotionally or that way, or we're trying to make the viewer want to side with more of the antagonistic character at this time? Is there any kind of concentrated focus to do that?
I mean, I don't know. That may go on in the writer's room. You know, I'm so much goes on in the writer's room, you know, like 6 months or more before I get the episodes. So it goes through different filters, I guess, and when I get the episodes, I'll really sit down with Ryan and and really try and sort of like scramble into his head and to really understand, what it is he wants or what he's going for, because you can only get certain amount on the page in the script. And obviously there's been so many conversations between the writers that happened before that. I will never try and push a scene to be on one side or the other. I'm always just looking for the truth of the scene. And I really work a lot on the script before I even meet the actors. I'll look at the scene and think about what is the conflict here, or how does someone change within the scene? What happens to each character at the beginning of the scene? Where are they at the beginning and where are they at the end, and why? And how do they impact each other? And who is the most powerful person in the room? So how does that affect each of the individual characters? And because there are so many characters in the scene, that takes a lot of work. And then I'll look at each character and think, where have they come from and where are they going and what do they want? What do they want, for the whole episode? What do they want for the whole season? What do they want for their whole life? And what is it that's motivating that? And then within the beats of the scene, I try and find sort of action verbs or as ifs, it's, as if someone's just giving you the news that your mother died in a car crash or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very heavy one, but
well, I mean, given what you're having to direct the content, it's actually not too. You're in the ballpark.
Yeah. So all of these, you go through each character and think about that, and then, so I'll have all these different. I work off an iPad, off Scriptation, and I have like hundreds of different notes. And then the day before, I have to sort of like put them in a file and put them to the side because I need a clean script to then work as we do different takes to add different notes and my thoughts on each take. Because sometimes also I'll write things on my iPad and then I'll go and talk to an actor about a scene, and they'll be just picking up, they just want to see my secret notes, and they're like, oh, you thought that? Oh, and I'm like, that's just for me, that's not for you. But because I want to hear their ideas, so we'll do, the first take we'll do, and I'll try and we'll do a rehearsal. We'll just say the words out loud and try and do that without any sort of acting, if possible, in a way, so we can just hear the words, because we do work quite fast. And then we'll find the blocking, and I might have an idea, but the actors might have something completely different. And someone like Matt Smith, for example, is always, and his character Damon is such an agent of chaos. You never really know, what he's going to do, or where, his choices are always surprising and brilliant because they're surprising, because we want to surprise the audience and surprise the other characters within the scene as well. So pretty much often when I've thought of the blocking for Damon, Matt will come on and it will be all out the window and we'll try something completely different. And then kudos to the team, to, all the camera operators and the crew and Alejandro, they'll work to that because we want to support the truth of a scene. Even if we've planned it one way, but we find a truth that seems just a better choice, that seems a more exciting choice, we'll always go with that, and we'll scramble and
we got to move all the marks and reblock it real fast. But I mean, I guess
exactly.
But if it plays out organically, then it's really like, okay, look, we can shift here and then get the marks on the floor. So that's a lot of the reason for blocking anyway. But I bet even though it might add to the workload a bit, it sounds like you have a lot of fun doing it, because it probably really innovates, what's going, like the whole emotion and the camaraderie of the scenes, I would imagine, getting ready for it.
It really does, and I think when I was a younger director, I felt like I had to stick with everything. I had to be the one to make the decisions and know everything at the beginning. And something that happens as you get older, where you just let go of all of that a little bit. So I think you become a better director. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some young people out there who are really innovative as it is. But for me, I didn't grow up in a family where anyone was in theatre or film or anything. And, I've definitely had imposter syndrome for a very long time. So I'm still quite surprised I'm here directing, but very, very happy.
All right, and it's time for a quick break here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and we are speaking with director Clare Kilner about her recent work on The House of the Dragon and the Fallout series. More on that when we return. It's time to turn things over to Simon for his segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire. Stay tuned, we'll be back after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
When it comes to making movies, anything can go wrong. And tonight we're here to discuss that on the Cinematic Dumpster Fire.
Well, hello, I'm your host Simon, and thank you for joining me during another special segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire. First, hope you're enjoying the interview with Clare Kilner. She's done some incredible work, so stay tuned because Poxy Ragan will be back with her in just a bit. But first, it's time for another terrifying movie-making tale to keep all of you young filmmakers out there aware of the dangers that lie ahead for the not-so-well-read.
Poetic, Simon, poetic.
Thanks, Poxy.
All right, so I'm here. I have my s'more, and I'm shaking in my sleeping bag. What are you going to tell us about tonight?
Fitzcarraldo.
Oh, no. I'm out of here. The terror is just too much to take.
You're telling me. And now, let me tell you the story of the making of Fitzcarraldo, a film by the well-known Werner Herzog.
1979, man. Hell of a year, hell of a year.
Shut up, Poxy. I'm trying to talk here.
All right.
So, the story of Fitzcarraldo is named after its lead character, who is an opera and Caruso-obsessed Irishman. Side note, Enrico Caruso was a famous Italian tenor, just in case you didn't know. Fitzcarraldo wants to become a rubber baron in Peru and devises a plan to travel a steamboat through the Amazon basin and drag it over a steep hill from one river to another. He wants to make a fortune off of rubber, and the section he needs to get it isn't an easy one to get to. But if he can accomplish all of this, then he can fund his dreams of bringing opera to Iquitos, Peru. Big plans, right? Enter Werner Herzog. Now, if you know about Herzog...
If they know about Herzog, then they know what you're gonna tell them already.
Look, it's a good story, alright? So shut up and eat your s'more while I tell it. Jeez. Anyway, Herzog likes to live out his films. Or at least that was the idea for Fitzcarraldo. At first, anyway. So, the journey for the production began when Jason Robards was cast as Fitzcarraldo, acting alongside the Rolling Stones lead singer, Mick Jagger. However, after filming what had been said around 40% of the film, Robards came down with dysentery and was advised not to return, so he didn't. Then Mick Jagger was called away to do what he does best.
What's that?
Sing for the Rolling Stones, duh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're killing me, Poxy.
You just keep telling the tale, Simon.
Yeah. So Herzog brings in his old friend, Klaus Kinski, notorious for his previous clashes with Herzog, to play Fitzcarraldo, where two of them would have numerous clashes on set. Fun fact, the local tribe working on set offered to kill Kinski for Herzog.
Yeah, it happens with me and Reagan and our guests all the time.
I don't know if that's a good thing, Foxy.
Well, I'm still here, ain't I?
Touché. Anyway, the big talk about in the story is the steamboat being pulled over this huge hill. Now, in the movie, Fitzcarraldo is helped by local tribes, who's actually helped with the entire movie and act extensively throughout. There is even a documentary about the film called The Burden of Dreams, which focuses heavily on the local indigenous tribes in Peru, particularly the Campas, who helped Herzog carve out his path alongside the hillside as he would construct a way to pull it up over the hill and down the river on the other side.
Fun fact, the Campas actually offered to kill Kinski for Herzog because Kinski was so difficult to deal with. And the dumpster fire part kind of sets in around here. Again, since Herzog already had to recast and shoot a large section of the movie, but the physics and engineering put into that muddy hillside left all involved skeptical and terrified at its potential and eventual failure that would ensue when they did finally take the leap in attempting to pull the steamboat up over the hill.
The mud in the movie is substantial. In The Burden of Dreams, you can see Herzog and the actors up to their waist standing in it. They had a tractor they used to do the majority of the work, but it was used and broke down all the time. And when you get parts out there, it's like waiting on a letter in the 17th century. And when the wrong part shows up, well, need I say more?
So the first engineer quits and tells them catastrophe looms, right? In the movie, there is actually, of course, there's no tractor, and the tribe cuts through the woods for days and constructs nearly everything manually, which appears to be pretty grueling. Now, actually, in the movie, people die when the cables snap on the first attempt.
And in production, people died. There were two small planes which were used to transport people, supplies, and etc. that crashed during production. I mean, Herzog has been criticized in all sorts of ways for how he created this film. I do know that the Argaruna burnt down the first set, which led to some subsequent building of the second set.
Yeah, I mean, what really drives at the crew seems to be the kind of time lapse during production around trying to get over that hill. Like, Kinski seems to have gone crazy over being trapped in the jungle, along with a lot of the extras who weren't secure to camp for nearly as long as they ended up having to. But, again, this is a chaotic story. I mean, why does the writing team keep giving you these?
Because they're crazy wild stories. I mean, talk about pushing the limit. Herzog said he should be put in an asylum at the end of Burden of Dreams. However, after reassembling a new engineering team, Herzog eventually got the steamboat over the hill, and in the movie, so does Fitzcarraldo. But it doesn't end there, because more lies ahead as the movie progresses further down the river. But I won't spoil that part for you. Anyway, go watch Fitzcarraldo and read about Fitzcarraldo. If you're well learned about Apocalypse Now and its subsequent documentary about the making of the film, then this is right down your alley. Obviously, there isn't enough time to cover all of this here, so per usual, forgive my haphazard delivery. After all, I didn't write this crap.
Big words, Simon.
Eat it, Poxy. Anyway, enough out of me. This has been another segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire right here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm your host, Simon, and stay tuned because we will return to the interview with director Clare Kilner right after these messages. Until next time, everybody.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast. Well, you studied at...
I studied at the Royal College of Art in London. But before that, in my early 20s, I went to Guildhall School of Music and Drama and did a stage management course. And that's sort of lighting and sound and props for theatre. And then I worked in theatre for a while with some really interesting directors, but I felt a little bit like I was facilitating everyone else's creativity, and I had stories that I wanted to tell and ideas and things. So then I started making short films on my own. And then when I was 29, I got into the Royal College of Art, which had specifically a directing for film and TV course, which was 2 years. And it gave me the space and time to really learn and write short films. And I got a commission at that point by the BBC to make a little drama documentary about obsessive compulsive disorder that went on, to film festivals and then was on TV. So that really helped me get my sort of first paid work.
But you wanted to, I mean, you've mentioned, and I don't mean to deviate too much when I asked you about Fallout, but you did, this correlates into going from, you had initially worked in film, we talked about Wedding Date, and then there's, of course, How to Deal, and you worked on Janice Beard, but you wanted to get into television, which seems, maybe I'm just guessing in the wrong direction here. I'm kind of not involved with the industry, so to speak, but most people seem to want to go the other way. So what drove you to want to go from film to television? And in the world of streaming, it seems like you have definitely gone where you've wanted to now. But the road to get there, what was that like?
I mean, the thing is, and I do like speaking about this because there was about a period of about 8 years where I couldn't get a job and it was really hard. So I did The Wedding Date, and for some reason after that, I mean, I was always up for jobs, or I would get jobs on films that didn't happen. And initially when I started, I was writing. I wrote Janice Beard 45 words per minute myself because it was about my life as a temp secretary, which I did lots of temp secretarial work before, to support my short films that I was making and stuff. But then I moved to LA. I got a job shooting a film that was meant to shoot in India, and then the post-production was going to be in LA. And so I was going to make the move to LA. And 2 weeks before I was due to start shooting that film, the finance fell apart and it closed. And I was like, all right, well, I was heading to LA. I think I'm just going to keep going and head to LA anyway. And then I arrived in LA and it was 2007. It was the big strike at that point, and everything sort of ground to a halt and I couldn't get a job. And I think, I was so involved with trying to find a job in film that I wasn't writing as well. So I was sort of I don't know, I just felt little bit lost. And I was, I needed to earn money. I didn't have any extra money or savings or anything. So I was jumping onto films that, weren't really properly funded and getting paid $3,000 here for like 6 months work or something, in working with the writers and developing scripts. And it's a place that you can spend a lot of, before you know it, you've spent like a few years doing that, and you haven't made a film. So then people are more loath to give you a job in a film. And it was a very difficult time. And I saw a lot of my friends, who were making that transition into TV, because suddenly it's sort of like the golden age of TV was beginning. And some amazing, if you got a job in TV, you would actually, shoot it. I mean, I worked on an adaptation of an English book for about 2 years, and I had that was going to be a film, and I'd every scene worked out in my head, so in my head I was going to make that film, and then it never got made. There was some dispute that happened between producers, and the whole thing fell apart. But it was really hard, I think, as a female director to break into TV at that time. And all my male friends who had pretty much done similar work to me were all working non-stop, and I was really jealous, and I really wanted to, but I just couldn't. And I really networked a lot, like went to wherever I could, and lots of the time I was thinking, I'm just like a loser coming to these meetings. I'm never going to get a job from this. But eventually, one or two things fell into place, and I got a job in the middle. And then I actually did leave my agent and manager at the time, and didn't have a new agent and manager to go to. But I was like, I need to change something, because whatever I'm doing is not working. And then I started writing again. So I went right back to the core of why I wanted to get into filmmaking in the first place, which was to tell stories that I sort of felt akin to, that felt true and honest to me, and I wanted to put out there. And from doing that, a big agent read my scripts and said, "Oh, we want you to come to our agency, to Paradigm." And they read the script, and they invited me to go in, and I thought I was going for a meeting, but I literally walked into this boardroom, and there was about 12 different agents there, and they were all telling me, why they wanted me to join their agency, which was amazing. And then a friend of mine introduced me to Ragnar, my manager, who has been absolutely incredible. She has incredible relationships with the whole TV industry, and it's a real partnership. And bit by bit, it's happened. And I love working in TV, because every job I get, I work, and it happens.
That makes sense. That is one hell of a journey, though.
Uh-huh.
but persistence is key, because now, I mean, you're doing material that the whole world's seeing. So go ahead, Reagan.
Yeah.
Reagan was going to ask a question.
And on the subject of that, switching gears to Fallout, when making Fallout, how did the expectations of fans drive the focus of the show's development?
I can't really answer that, because I wasn't involved with the development of the show. I came in, once it was already up and running, and Jonathan Nolan was already shooting. I got a call, actually, because I think I was meant to start in the October, and they said, "Oh, Claire, actually, could you come to Namibia, because 2 of the scenes in your episodes are shooting there."
So you actually had to go out to the skeleton and shoot out there.
Yeah. Yes, I went out to
wow.
Namibia, and it was amazing. They said, "You need to get FBI clearance, because we're working in these old gold mines." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." So I got the clearance.
Wow.
And got on a plane and went to Namibia. And basically in my job, when people say, "Will you do this?" I always say yes. Like, you can't. And I initially thought the mines would be underground. I was a bit scared of. I'm not great in sort of caves and mines. And I was like, okay, but I'm just going to have to grin and bear it. I've got to, I can't say no.
Yeah.
But then I got there and the mines were open. They weren't underground. So I was very happy. But yeah, we flew to Johannesburg and I met Jonathan and the producers and the production designer and Walton and Ella, and then we all got on a plane and went to Namibia, and it was incredible shooting there, and meeting Aaron Motten in the whole Brotherhood armor was just, it was out of this world. We got caught in a sandstorm, and then luckily the day we were shooting, the wind calmed down and we had this perfect day. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean that's it's again it's a lot of world building. Is there a lot of did you kind of face the same sort of the tech challenge? No, I mean maybe not challenges, but there's obviously a lot of tech going on set there. So is there a lot of communication with the VFX team for this as well, or are you capturing a lot in camera? I know there's been extensive like makeup done and all kinds of things like that we've read about in the press, but how is it going on the ground?
Yeah, it's great. We have a VFX person who's there all the time advising us, and Howard Cummings, the production designer, is always there at the beginning of the scene, and we'll show you his visuals, and we'll see scenes that have been shot already, so we have a strong sense of understanding what is going to be there. I mean, I did a lot of the underground scenes, which were amazing because in Steiner Studios in Brooklyn, there was this whole world, the whole underground world had been built, and I loved the whole look of it, the whole sort of 50s feel to it. The every character was very characterful. It had there was a lot of humor to be had from it, from their sort of innocence, and a lot of mystery from how their innocent, beautiful, sort of seemingly happy world had been cracked open. But a lot of it was real. All the underground stuff was very real, and it was all there, apart from the projections, and over the cornfield.
That makes it. No, like you say, there is a lot of humor in it that's off of the naivete. But what's in the 7th episode when Maximus is trashing the entire, like in the vault, and is like, hey, no, wait, they're gonna let us go. But that whole scene's really funny because in contrast to say, even though there is a ton of gore, and you do have to deal with a lot of gore and violence in both House of Dragon and Fallout.
Yeah.
In that scene, like when they go, and I don't mean to spoil anything, but like, and so I'll kind of be vague, but like when it goes from looking like very much like French Revolution execution about to go down to we're gonna saw the rope open real easy here on you. So there is like the managing the tone from that kind of sort of brutality towards the satire. Is there how do you approach that? Is it really just mostly you're just kind of taking a lot of fun or having a lot of fun with it, but when you have to deal with some scenes that almost portray a bit more seriousness, like say the Ghoul, Walter Goggins at some points, even though he does have comedic relief, there's a lot of points where he can be very serious, and then there's the flashbacks in that you've also had to deal with the versatility of that character. And how did you all approach that?
I mean, I think Jonathan Nolan really set the tone of that from the very beginning, because and it was also very much in Graham and Geneva, the showrunners, the writing, because there was always this very uncomfortable but happy mixture of a sort of like the genre, the world building sort of fantasy game world, with this the human condition and the flaws and foibles of being human and the comedy of that. So, I mean, I always just come at it from a very human point of view and what is real for people. And, and Aaron Motten he's he gave his character this almost very sort of childlike innocence. So, you know, when a 2-year-old, you know, is playing, they play and they have fun and they're laughing. But then if something goes wrong, they can have a tantrum very quickly and it could go haywire and they could be throwing things around the room. So his character, everything comes from character. And I think any any violence as well comes from character and the truth of that moment. And, you know, so I always just approach it from what does this person want and what is preventing them to get what they want and how extreme does that feel to that character. And then, you know, everything stems from that and you choose your shots and then, you know, you have fun as well. You think, okay, you know, especially if you've got a lot of resources, you could, what if this happens? What if that happens? You know, what if a guy he throws a guy and he gets stuck up in a tree? You know, all these, it's my job is so fun.
That's it. And some of the material. I mean, Fallout is a really, really fun show too. Like what you were saying with Aaron's childishness. Like, say when the fuse cell when they come out too. Again, like right in that same sort of scene, and she's like, "You need to give it back," and he's like,
and he refuses
what?
to. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
With co-directing that episode, what was what was the reason behind co-directing? And
Well,
it was done with Fred
that
Toyle?
was, you know, what happened there is it's a bit of a sort of boring response because what happened was the dates clashed with House of the Dragon. So I was initially meant to do that full episode and then I couldn't because I had agreed to go, the dates moved and I'd agreed to go back to House of the Dragon. So Fred Toy very graciously took on half of it. So we shared a credit, but we didn't actually co-direct it. We directed half of the episode each.
Oh.
Which half? Can you tell us which half? Are you able to say which half?
You know, it's scenes here and there. I can't.
Oh,
It's
okay.
all-
So it is.
all-
So it is
all
kind of
thrown
cut up.
together.
All right,
Yeah,
all right. It makes
none
sense.
of it. We didn't.
So,
So hopefully it's just seamless. You know, seamless stylistically.
oh yeah, no. I mean, that's why we had to ask. I mean, yeah. There's definitely it's fluid now with multiple episodes, like say in House of Dragon or of course Fallout, versus dealing with something like what Gen V. How do you direct or approach dealing with one-offs? Do you feel more? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to elaborate on the question, but how is it dealing with multiple episodes versus one-off episodes when you're working with the series?
Yeah, I definitely prefer to doing. I definitely prefer to direct multiple episodes because you just get to know the actors, you get to know the producers, you become a bit of a family with the crew, you know your camera operators, you know the props department, you know everybody, and you've established trust. You know, when you go in, you know, it was fun doing Gen V. It was like such a, you know, just like my episode with all the puppets. It's kind of crazy and really interesting to tackle that. When you're doing one episode, you're coming in more as a jobbing director. So you get, you know, your maybe 9-10 days prep, and then might get 9 or 10 days to shoot, and then you get a short time to edit. So, you know, you've got to be a real team player, and I feel like you have to be careful when you come in to do one episode. Don't go too crazy with too many ideas. You have to like read the room and understand, you know, what you're walking into, and also it takes a little while to find the tone, especially if you're doing a first season. You know, what is the tone? Obviously, having the boys, you know, really helps. Having watched that,
Yeah, because you have something to kind of base off of from that.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, you are. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like you're saying, I guess because you're kind of still setting the tone if you're working in the first season, so you're contributing to that in a lot of ways.
A lot of the time when you're working in first seasons of show, you're discovering the tone as you go along. The actors are discovering, everybody's discovering it, and sometimes it's not till you see the whole season up you go, oh, now I know what the tone of this is. You know, because you know, also when even when I made films, you know, sometimes when I made Janice Beard, and that was based on my life as a temp. It wasn't when I started going to festivals with it and saw audiences' reactions to it, like, oh, this is what this is. Like, now I see what this beast has become. Like, but when I'm in it, making it, sometimes you're just making so many decisions, you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, now I mean, what do you do when you're dealing with like these this is an advice question. It sounds like we're grilling you. I promise we're not. But no, it's a because you now have a lot, or at least you at certain points working with Fallout and House of Dragon, you had a lot of work on your hands, and then you have to manage the theme of that. So is there not to drive too much into any kind of personal aspects of your life, but has there been how has that impacted you personally as far as your workflow and your day-to-day structure of having to stay so concentrated on those?
I mean, I love it. I love the creativity. I love the feeling of working with a huge team of people. I mean, House of the Dragon is quite unique in that every scene is cross-boarded. So all of us directors are there from the beginning. We get a really decent amount of prep. We're all our offices are next to each other. We can go in and out of each other's offices with questions or ideas or thoughts. For example, when we go to Spain, all the directors go to Spain. If we go to Wales, all the directors go to Wales. You have drinks afterwards, meals afterwards. You really feel like part of a company. And so it's kind of 9 months that we're all thrown in together working. And then also because we're cross-boarding, I mean, it's very hard for the actors because sometimes they might, for example, be doing, scene 5 and episode 9 in the morning and scene 20 from episode 3 in the afternoon.
Oh,
So
wow. You all are really working through a really complex schedule then.
really complex schedule. I mean, it's an incredible puzzle that the producers work out and the first ADs work out. It's, so complicated. And, we've got, 2 teams, 2 crews, and sometimes a third or fourth crew all working at the same time. But so because of that, I also do get downtime. So we might start shooting and I might shoot for 3 weeks, and then I might not be shooting for a week or 2 weeks. And so what's great about that is as the whole thing progresses, you learn as you go along. So I might, glean something about Rhaenyra that I didn't know at the very beginning, and that I can now add into, my thoughts when I'm thinking about scenes later on. And they're not necessarily later scenes, but it might be an earlier scene. So I could then root it in something. So I might have shot something from episode 9 and seen something, but then then I might shoot episode 4 at a later date, but then I can sort of put a little gem, a little treasure, sort of bury a little treasure because I know it's going to grow later on. So it's quite interesting working in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, with season 2, I know we're limited as what we can discuss about it so far, but in that, what episode? So your episodes you're working on, at least this season so far, that you're aware of. Do you know all that you're working on, or you? I know you got episode 2 you're working on, correct? Or that you've already
I on season 2 I did directed episodes 2 and 5.
All right, so episodes 2 and 5. Now with now I read a little bit about making some changes made to lighting for season 2. Was there some did you have to deal with any addressing of that as far as the lighting adjustments on set, or is that dealt with mostly in post?
I mean, I think there was a bunch of meetings at the beginning, and we definitely looked at, what, how dark it should be, how dark it should not be, and all the directors and the DPs, all, and the showrunners, everyone came together and, talked about that. But really that was led by the DPs. They had many meetings and, discussed lenses and cameras, and I wasn't a part of that. And
No.
I was happy to not be a part of that, but because the way I work as well is I think DPs really enjoy this because I'm if I can sort of start talking about a character and what they're feeling and how I want the audience to feel about that character, and then they suggest lenses, and I love working in that way rather than saying we want a 50 from here. I like the collaboration because it's also still bringing everything, even the technical aspects, always down to character.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more creative rather than factory mill, it doesn't like, and there's a familiarity to it. I feel like probably, maybe, I mean, this is just me guessing, but it seems like it would help with the synergy on set, not to obfuscate things. Cause obviously everybody's like, if we're called, need a 85, need a 50, some people don't even know the difference between prime and zooms. So, by being able to keep things on the ground and understandable, that makes sense. Now, is there a real delicacy to sound and work? I know you like dealing with a lot of sound, or you're interested in sound and the emotion and the way that drives it. It being such a big set, is it like particular to capture sound? Do you have to really all focus on how you're going to approach that?
I mean, we have great sound designers and recordists, and I think, sometimes, for example, sex scenes, it's difficult. You can't put a radio mic on someone when they're naked.
Yeah.
And, sometimes, when people, when people are very close together, sometimes, you might get a bit of feedback, but, sound, I think it's so interesting, and
it can be a pain in the ass. You're talking about labs right now, and labs can be a pain in the ass.
Yeah. But I love, I really like, especially when I arrive at a location, really listening to the sounds of the birds and the winds and so many sounds, until you like close your eyes and start really truly listening. It's so evocative, and so I'm always wanting to like capture that. I remember hearing, I can't remember what show it was for, but hearing some sound designers talk about how before they even got the scripts, they knew the location where the show was going to be set, and they went and just recorded so many different sounds and then created sort of almost a musical track from the sounds that they captured. Just because a sound, it's a bit like the Proustian thing of taste, or that it can just very quickly pull you somewhere emotionally. So it's a delicate balancing act, but it's difficult to talk about, but when the sound is right, or or the music is right, or how you're going to integrate sound and music, as well as pulling sound away, how powerful that can be as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's such a delicacy that lends so much to the visual that at times, we definitely, I mean, anybody that works in the industry doesn't take it for granted, but a lot of the viewers at times probably could to some degree. But then once there's an understanding of it, and I think at that point no one takes it for granted. Everyone looks at it like it is probably the most tantamount exercise.
Yeah,
it's
incredible. I mean, sound designers are so incredibly creative.
And there's a lot of sound design going on in House of the Dragon. Now, we'll let you go here in a second. I know Reagan had one more question, and then, of course, the only thing that I wanted to ask you, and I promise I'll quit talking. I'm sorry, Reagan. I'll quit talking. I promise. No, but
How dare you?
I was curious. Season 2. What's been different about your experience for season 2, and what are you? Is there anything you hope the audiences take away, or anything you're particularly excited about? I know you do celebration parties for the episode. You got a good celebration party lined up?
Yes. I mean, I just hope it touches people's hearts, and I know there's a lot of, bad things happen, but there's also just a lot of emotion and love and hate. And what I love the most is sometimes, on YouTube or something, you see people watching your episode and to see the connection they feel, and the, like you say, people having these parties to watch the show together, and how it draws people together. Stories draw people together, and that is why I'm in this industry and what I love about it.
Oh yeah, they're made haste with episode 1, invoking emotion. So I know there's probably plenty more out there to keep us going. I know our showrunner. So our showrunner is the one, like he's a huge fan of the show, and he was like, I went back and watched all of it. I'm super excited about it. So he's excited about this one for sure. But definitely appreciate you making time. Reagan, what were you gonna? I'm sorry.
How
I
dare
did it. I'm sorry.
you keep talking. I'm just kidding. All right, well, looking back on your body of work to this point, what decisions stand out as turning points in your career, which have led to your continued success, and what are you looking forward to directing in the future, if you are allowed to share with us?
Ooh, yes. I mean, I think when I started working in theatre, and then I had a moment which was a turning point that really got me into film. I was literally sitting in my flat in Richmond in the UK, reading a book by Laurie Lee called As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning. And it was about a writer who walked from Richmond to the south of Spain in 1935. And it was the stories of the people he met and his journey across Spain. And I just had a light bulb moment where I thought, I had a little beetle, I think you could call it a bug here. And I thought, I'm going to follow this guy's journey. And I had no money. I was like temping, but I got my hands. A friend of mine worked for British Medical TV, and she had an old Canon Scopic, which was sort of like a journalist's camera from the 70s. And she said, oh, you can have that, but the batteries aren't working. So I managed to find someone who could fix the battery. And, I've never, operated a camera before, or I'd never changed film in a black camera bag, but I learned how to do that. And a friend of mine who was doing sound was working in theatre for the RSC, and he got his hands on some sound equipment. And we got into the bug and we drove through Spain, and we just had a tent and we're like camping on the side of the road. And we had this film, and we were like basically going to campsites and stealing ice so we could keep the film cold before we sent it back to the UK. And we made this little film, and it wasn't that it was a great film, but the experience of making it was brilliant. And then I spent months working at night in this just a sort of community filmmaking center, which had an old Steenbeck, and I started editing, and I just taught myself editing, and I just loved being in that dark room, with this film and with sound and with music. And I did a little bit of voiceover and putting that all together. So there was just like one light bulb moment there, which set me off on my whole path.
Yeah, but you like to do it all. So you really went in and spent the time to figure it all out and make it work. That's pretty wild.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
and in the I guess in the future, more TV. Of course, I love House of the Dragon. I'm part of the family now, and I also have a couple of films. One that I'm writing, and one that I'm attached to. So I look forward to making those in the future too.
All right. Well, you've definitely been very busy, and you got me nostalgic with the film over there. And putting ice on the film too. That's a wild story. It's I don't know. That's cool. It kind of puts you there with it when you're thinking about it. Now we're at the campfire trying to keep it cold with you.
Yeah.
But best of luck to you with season 2. Definitely, we all are looking forward to seeing season 2, House of the Dragon. Everything else that you have going on, you've worked incredibly hard for it. So we appreciate you making the time to join us on the Ghost of Hollywood, and we look forward to seeing what you bring to us next.
It's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you guys as well. You just had such really good questions as well. Thank you.
All right, I'm Poxy Leonard here with Ms. Ragan, and you've just been hearing from director Clare Kilner, whose recent work we've been discussing on House of the Dragon and the Fallout series, and also revisiting some of the other work she's done with her career and seeing what lies next. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. We'll be right back after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast. Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and it's time for us to say so long again.
We'd like to thank Clare Kilner for joining us on the show this evening to discuss her directing career and recent work on the House of the Dragon series and Fallout.
We'd also like to thank Claire's manager, Rodna Nervik, for organizing the interview, and to Warner Brothers Discovery for their guidance and oversight throughout. Also, big shout out to our crew, especially Cy and Lynn, for all of their hard work this season. We'd also like to thank Chris Klom for his hard work on this episode.
Chris came back from vacation with vengeance.
Yeah, And boy, was the writing team glad to see him.
Who, Zach?
Yeah, the other me.
What?
Never mind. And with that, we will see you all again in a few weeks as we continue our wild ride through season 4.
For more information on The Ghost of Hollywood, check out theghostofhollywood.com. The Ghost of Hollywood is also streaming wherever you get your podcast or found on a radio dial near you.
And that's it, wall crawlers. Go ride a dragon, chase a ghoul, or whatever it is you wild, freaky people do.
Until next time, everybody, good morning and good night.
You've been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood was created by Zach and Reagan Flannery. The show was written by Chris Klon, Zach Flannery, and Reagan Flannery. The show is mixed by Lennox Flannery and mastered by Grady Sizemore at Microphonic Meltdown. For more information on The Ghost of Hollywood, please visit our website at